he was a scientist, and he discovered that there were universes stacked on top of his own. New worlds meant only one thing: new lands to be conquered.
What is the Marvel Multiverse, and where did it come from? How did it start? And why do we call the main continuity Earth 616? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. This is Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host, Amanda McKnight. We're doing something a little different today as we aim to answer these questions and more during this attempt to explain the Marvel Multiverse. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. What is the Marvel Multiverse? Well, while it might feel massive, it's actually a small area of the Omniverse, which contains within it all possible multiverses that have ever existed. The Marvel Multiverse is made of divergent realities based on various possible outcomes for some of Marvel's most prolific events, with various actions and choices of those involved shaping various realities. Some of these realities also exist with similar characters and events, but simply displaced into different time periods. The Marvel Multiverse is believed to be limitless, stated to be so even by the Beyonder, who said there is a seemingly endless number of dimensions. The Book of Vishanti also confirms this, estimating there are literally a transfinite number, that is a number greater than infinity, of universes within the Marvel Multiverse alone. The Web of Life and Destiny is believed to act as a map of the known multiverse, where its nodes represent universes and the threads connecting them are believed to be people, chiefly spider totems, which of course connect the universes. While the DC Multiverse has a clearer point for its inception in the comics, the Marvel Multiverse was more developed over time, with a few key moments and key characters leading up to and explaining how it was shaped, instead of being wrapped up in one major event created to help sort of fix the continuity of its universe, which for DC was the event known as Crisis on Infinite Earths. Here we don't have a single event, but more a growth and expansion over time that led us to the definition of the Marvel Multiverse. When it comes to the beginning of the multiverse from a comic history standpoint, some cite the first Marvel Comics as its origin, Motion Picture Funnies Weekly issue number 1 from 1939, or more commonly known and accepted as the first Marvel comic, Fantastic Four issue number 1 from 1961, possibly also an important number in regards to the multiverse. These comics are considered by some to be the beginning of the multiverse, since technically, retroactively, it has existed within the world of the comics since then. How did we come to the idea of the Marvel Multiverse though? When was it first invented? How was it integrated? In reality, it was a bunch of tiny little steps that actually brought us to the concept of the Marvel Multiverse and the naming therein of the main reality as Earth 616 and the often numerical designations of other realities. Back in 1962, in Strange Tales issue 103, Johnny Storm gets his first glimpse into the multiverse when he travels to the 5th dimension, which would later be designated Earth 1612. In 1963, the multiverse began to expand in terms of our knowledge of its history in the comics, with various worlds including Subatomica and Earth 6311, aka Kang's Other Earth, showing up in Fantastic Four. The FF team in general would actually be really important when it came to establishing and defining areas of the multiverse and its rules, but aside from them, Doctor Strange would also be a key character when it came to the expansion and definition of the multiverse. In Strange Tales issue 126 and 127 from 1964, we follow Doctor Strange as he journeys into the Dark Dimension to do battle with its dread Lord Dormammu. And speaking of seemingly dark and terrible dimensions, the Fantastic Four would also have their own experience with one known as the Negative Zone in Fantastic Four Annual issue number 6 in 1969. The Avengers would also get in on the multiversal fun in Avengers issue 85, where we'd first travel alongside them to the reality of Earth 712, or Earth S, the home of the Squadron Supreme, at least one iterations of the Squadron Supreme at this point. The Fantastic Four series is also where the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, would pop up from time to time, although the organization would make its first appearance in Thor issue 371 in 1986. So it was a while before the Time Police showed up to, make sure the multiverse wasn't getting too mad. The multiverse expanded even more with the first What If comic series starting in 1977, which was all about revisiting events that had happened in Marvel Comics and answering questions surrounding possible differences that could have occurred, such as what if a hero had made another choice? How would the universe be changed? Creating creating multiple alternate universes just by answering these questions in each issue, some of which created such popular realities that they got their own series or line of comics, such as with the Spider-Girl series of the MC2 reality of Earth 982, which spun out of a What If issue, so pretty cool. When it came to defining the borders, if you will, of all these universes, there were a few people that were key. These people were instrumental in determining what to call this collection of worlds and the main continuity, as well as determining where the borders existed between various universes and multiverses. One figure of major importance in all of this was Mark Grunwald, also known for being the one to inspire the character Mobius M. Mobius of the Time Variance Authority. Grunwald was the first one to use the term multiverse when it came to describing the madness that was this booming and ever-expanding collection of possibilities and alternate Marvel realities. Grunwald first coined the term multiverse over at Marvel to describe this collection of universes, but he didn't stop there. He even established that the Marvel multiverse existed within a greater omniverse, which was the collection of all fictional multiverses and real-world multiverses so even our reality, that had ever existed. First to write the term Earth 616 in print was writer Alan Moore and artist Alan Davis in the story Rough Justice, which was in the Marvel UK anthology The Daredevils issue number 7, first released in 1983. Later on, this story would be reprinted in the more familiar Marvel UK series Captain Britain. The term is used by Saturnine, who uses it to differentiate Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, of the main Marvel universe from other members of the Captain Britain Corps. Here the multiverse was established as being protected by Merlin. The Captain Britain Corps were created to protect their own version of the British Isles, protecting all versions across the multiverse collectively, or at least that was what they did before they were all killed at one point. Speaking of multiversal protectors, each universe also has a Sorcerer Supreme to protect it, and each universe also similarly seems to have their own Spider-Man or Spider-Person to protect it, as we learn with the revelation of the existence of destined spider-themed heroes known as Spider Totems, who are connected through the web of life and destiny. Going back to the Captain Britain origins for the term 616, it would also later be used in the USA-based Marvel Comics title Excalibur by writer Chris Claremont and once again artist Alan Davis, who is pretty key in actually getting the term Earth 616 out there and making it a thing. Dave Thorpe, the writer on Captain Britain prior to Alan Moore, was also mentioned in regards to the credit of the term Earth 616, and was named as such by Alan Davis, who obviously was super key to the integration of this term Earth 616 in the comics, having been there pretty much throughout and since the beginning of it. Why 616? Well, some claim that Thorpe picked it because it was the number of the beast. Many think of that as 666, but one of the earliest manuscripts of Revelation actually identifies that number instead as 616, and that it was used as a sort of commentary on his feelings about the modern superhero genre, which he apparently wasn't a huge fan of. Thorpe has apparently said that he came up with the number via numerology, taking the number of 666 and subtracting 50 to get 616. However, if you believe Alan Moore to have picked it, it was reportedly said by his son-in-law that Moore picked it at random because he liked the idea of a higher number Earth in comparison to lower numbered Earths in other multiverses out there, such as DC's multiverse, which usually has lower numbers for their alt realities, such as Earth 1 and Earth 2 and Earth 3. It's also theorized that the term 616 could have been chosen in honor of the first issue of Fantastic Four, with 61 resembling the year, 1961, and 6 resembling June, the 6th month, which was when it was released. Since its inception, this has been a formula sometimes actually used in the numbering of other universes within the Marvel multiverse, which is why it kind of makes sense that people think that's where 616 comes from. While many realities claim to be the futures of Earth 616, the 2099 reality of Earth 928 is believed to be the true future of Earth 616. But you know, with so many possibilities out there, even that claim should be taken with a grain of salt. Perhaps the truth of the matter is that Earth 928 is one of the more widely embraced futures among creators and fans. Earth 928, the 2099 future reality, and Earth 982, the MC2 reality, I would say hold top spots for greatest favorites for potential Marvel futures amongst fans. How did the Marvel multiverse come to be within the comics? The first firmament, one of the ultimate creators in the multiverse, was shattered by a war between its creations, the Aspirants, and the Celestials, where the Celestials were rebellious against the first firmament. The Aspirants instead frequently sought the firmament's approval, doing things only to please them. From the defeat of the first firmament, the multiverse was born and over time grew, leading the first firmament to at one point grow jealous Fearless and basically attack its personification, known as Eternity, during its 8th incarnation. That's right, you thought there was only one Marvel multiverse? No, there have been multiple iterations of the multiverse, which has been shown to be cyclical, with each incarnation of it ending in destruction and following that its rebirth, building up from ground zero, typically. One of the latest examples of this was the 8th incarnation, where after being destroyed by the Incursions and then turned into God Emperor Doom's battle world, it was recreated by Mr. Fantastic and the Future Foundation / Fantastic Four with the help of Molecule Man's powers. Although this incarnation is unique in the sense that it wasn't strictly built up from ground zero, so kind of breaks that status quo. After every cycle of a new multiverse being born, a new hierarchy also comes with it, which means that there is a power flux in regards to who could beat who in the highest part of the cosmic power spectrum, which typically, but perhaps not always, has the Living Tribunal ranked as most powerful. The MCU also seems to have their own multiverse, with the main continuity being designated within its own narrative as Earth 616 by those working at the Baxter Building. However, outside of their own multiverse, in the wider scope of the comic book multiverse, the main reality of the MCU was actually designated as Earth 199999. So that's a bit confusing. The multiverse was a concept first introduced in the MCU during the first Doctor Strange film, with the concepts of the mirror dimension and the dark dimension. Fairly fitting considering that even in the comics, Doctor Strange was one of the characters integral to introducing and shaping the multiverse. When it comes to the MCU multiverse, Phase 4 has seen a huge expansion of the concept, with shows like Loki expanding greatly on it with the variants and the TVA, and the animated series What If, inspired by the likewise foundational comic series of the same name, as well as films like Spider-Man No Way Home, which saw Sony's Spider-Verses incorporated into the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse, or MCM, as well. When it comes to Sony's Into the Spider-Verse franchise, this series also seems to have its own contained multiverse, separated from the MCU or the comics, although similar in many ways to the comics. It also makes reference to other animated Spider projects, implying that perhaps animated universes are connected via a Marvel animated multiverse or an MAM, although we kind of need to see more to know more about how that multiverse is structured, in my opinion. Time to open up our time-traveling history comic books class. Explaining Kang is a daunting feat because, well, Kang is not just Kang. Kang is many different people through time. And through this wibbly-wobbly time-traveling journey, I will be your guide. Me, Amanda. Kang the Conqueror is often considered to be the prime Kang, while other versions of the character are either Kang from alternate timelines or perhaps divergent versions of the character who split off through time to follow another path and become known by a completely different name, which sounds like an alternate version but it's kind of a little different. I'll touch somewhat on these alternates while trying to keep us mostly focused on the main Kang, Kang the Conqueror. Often known for being an Avengers and Fantastic Four villain, Kang the Conqueror is a villain from the future, who often manipulates the timeline in order to bring his plots to fruition. Himself, being a genius, he is also the kind of villain that can sometimes act as an ally to heroes when a threat is too great for them to handle it alone. Oh, and he's also a man of many chairs. He has a time chair that he literally uses to time travel, and he also has this sweet, floating, invisible beanbag chair because he's from the future. I hope in the future we all get invisible beanbag chairs, and guess what? We do, because this video is brought to you by Float, the new invisible beanbag chair. No, I'm just kidding. I wish though. If you invent an invisible beanbag chair, please sponsor us because I want one of those. Kang the Conqueror is kind of a weird villain with a very unique look, which I think is why so many are surprised to see him coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and were surprised when he was revealed to be, you know, kind of a villain that we'd be seeing. Initially, I was one of the people that also thought this was an unusual pick for a villain, especially with him appearing as the seeming main antagonist in the Ant-Man and the Wasp film Quantumania. But then I thought about it, and I realized just how serious of a threat Kang could be if he weren't reduced to simply being one iteration of the character. Kang is not just a universal threat like Thanos was after all, he is a potential multiversal threat. Fighting Kang is like fighting a one-man time-traveling army that is always multiple steps ahead of you, and also an army that seems to fight within itself and only creates more problems by doing that. And also a villain where anyone, even your closest allies, could secretly deliberately be manipulated by, or perhaps even just straight up be a Kang variant. Now, as soon as I realized that the multiverse was what we were building towards in the next phase, Kang's presence made a lot more sense to me. Multiverse of Madness, What If, Loki, and even to a certain extent I would say WandaVision all seem to be pushing towards this idea of expanding the MCU beyond just the home universe. I mean, even Ms. Marvel kind of gets in on that idea with her being able to access another dimension, or at least, we kind of allude to that, we see that a little bit in that series. With Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, I thought we might be going cosmic when we kind of got that tease where we're talking about where are the rings from, and now I think we're likely going beyond that to other dimensions. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ten Rings were like, I don't know, based in quantum something or doing some other universal stuff. They came from another world entirely. Kang the Conqueror first appeared as a foe to the Avengers in issue number 8 of their first series. He was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and boy is he a true Jack Kirby creation if ever I have seen one. He's a lot of a lot, and also, I mean, that character design, super Jack Kirby in the best of ways. While Kang was seemingly instantly defeated by having a radiation attack bounced back at him, forcing him to flee on his spaceship despite having somewhat of a natural immunity to radiation thanks to being from the future. This wouldn't nearly be the last we'd see of him, and I would say he almost instantly made his mark as an iconic character in that issue. Man, in the future, what do we have to look forward to? Invisible beanbag chairs and apparently some level of radiation immunity. Sounds pretty cool to me if that's our future. Kang the Conqueror is said to hail from the 30th century, believed to be the future or a version of the future of Earth 616. Kang's home reality, however, is known as Earth 6311, sometimes also referred to as Other Earth. Other Earth is a little bit different from the main reality in that there were no dark ages on this world, so that's also why we don't just call it, the future of 616, and honestly, even if we did, we'd probably still give it another number because we never want to be too specific in the comics with what the future really holds. Instead, this alternate Earth skipped the era known as the Dark Ages. Thanks to rapid advancement, they would end up with a colony on the moon, known as Luna, but unfortunately would succumb to war when both the Earth and the moon colony clashed with one another. As a result, the moon would be destroyed entirely, completely obliterated, and its pieces would rain down on Earth, causing massive destruction and leaving the people of planet Earth largely scattered and isolated. Other Earth would also be a world that Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel Richards of Earth 616, would travel to, unite together, and ultimately lead alongside his wife, Cassandra, who hailed herself from Earth 6311, helping Other Earth to recover from a devastating war. Cassandra herself, I believe, is a princess in that future, so, that happens and then you can rule together. However, Cassandra would eventually come to covet the power she held and become known as the villain Warlord, unbeknownst to her husband. But eventually the Fantastic Four would travel to Other Earth and help to defeat Warlord. Years later, Cassandra and Nathaniel's children would rule, truly ushering in an era of peace. It was during this time that Nathaniel Richards was born. No, not Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel. His possible future descendant, Nathaniel Richards. Are you confused yet? Although some signs actually point to this Nathaniel, who would become Kang, as a true descendant of Victor Von Doom instead, aka Dr. Doom, the Fantastic Four villain. And others still seem to reconcile both of these records, implying that Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311 was actually a descendant from both Reed and Victor, somehow. When I say that, I always imagine like a ship of Reed and Victor together and they're like in love, and then somehow Nathaniel's descended from that, but that's not exactly what we mean here, I don't think. When Nathaniel was just a teenager, one of his first other personas entered the chat. This was the person many of us got excited about as potentially existing in the MCU. Iron Lad. Iron Lad is a member of the Young Avengers, acting as the team's version of Iron Man. When Iron Man ends up getting help from a kid named Harley Keener in Iron Man 3, many people believed this could actually be a version of Iron Lad and we could see Iron Lad in the MCU. And now, with Kang being introduced into the MCU in Quantumania, many believe we could yet see a more comic book adaptation of Iron Lad via Jonathan Majors. Perhaps another alternate version of Kang, where instead Kang becomes the hero known as Iron Lad. This current theory comes from the comics, where Iron Lad, member of the Young Avengers, is later revealed to be a teenage version of Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311, aka a past version of Kang, before he obviously became Kang. Iron Lad comes to Earth 616 to hide, and hopefully seek help from the Avengers to protect him from his future self. refusing to grow up and become Kang. He's basically looking for a way to avoid that. In fact, Kang the Conqueror would even end up having a comic series with his younger self, Iron Lad, in 2021, titled Kang the Conqueror. Now this 5-issue mini would be all about Kang basically trying to teach his younger self and young Nathaniel wrestling with his own fate and destiny. Kang was basically trying to get him to accept him becoming Kang and teach him how to be the best Kang he can be. This wouldn't be the only version of young Kang that we'd come to know though. In addition to Iron Lad, there is also Kid Immortus, I believe in comic book history, who came into existence following Nathaniel's time as Iron Lad. While Iron Lad made his first appearance in the mid-noughts in Young Avengers issue number 1, Kid Immortus made his first appearance back in 2013 in FF issue number 8, the second FF volume. Not to be confused with the second Fantastic Four volume, which is a different title. So when I'm saying FF, I literally mean the letters FF. And I know that's confusing because FF is often used as a short form when we're talking about the Fantastic Four. But this time around, well, it is also being used in that context in terms of, what the book is about. It's also literally just FF if you're looking to follow up on that series and you're trying to Google it. Even when we aren't directly talking about time travel stuff in Kang's history, it can be confusing to follow. So hopefully you're following along with me here. Let me get my chart. Are you following along all this weirdness? Despite these adventures through time and the attempts young Nathaniel made to avoid ever becoming Kang, he would end up doing just that, becoming Kang. This part of the story, however, hasn't really been documented yet and is a bit of a gap in his history. What we do know is that Kang and other versions of him across time do exist, implying that even after his time as Kid Immortus and Iron Lad, Nathaniel Richards returned to his own timeline and eventually would decide to time travel, although it's unclear if his memories of being either of these younger personas remains with him or not. Eventually, Nathaniel would turn to time travel as a way to apparently alleviate boredom, coming to the ancient past and settling down in Egypt, where he would be known by another name, Ramatut. Nathaniel would indeed become Pharaoh Ramatut, living as a ruler in Egypt until the time-traveling Fantastic Four showed up and stopped him. Because, that's what they do. Following this, Ramatut attempted to return back to his own timeline from there, but he got caught in a time storm along the way, as I guess is warrant to happen when you are time traveling. Admittedly, I don't recall hearing of many other time storms in the history of Marvel Comics, but they must happen, and maybe they're just a little bit more rare. We only hear of them every now and then. I think Wolverine did end up in a time storm once with Puck when they traveled kind of through a picture back to a war-torn 1930s Spain, but other than Kang, I think that's about all I can think of. Let me know in the comments all the time storms you can think of. Oh wait, I actually think my insult of time storms has caused one to head our way. Oh no, hurry, click the like button to save me from being displaced through time. Help! Whew, okay, thanks to those of you who clicked like, that was a close one. And to all of you who did not click like, I want you to know that my life flashed before my eyes. Caught in the time storm, Ramatut ended up displaced in modern day Earth 616. There he met his possible ancestor Dr. Doom and was inspired to give up his Ramatut persona to become more like Doom. Which honestly, fair enough. If I met Dr. Doom, I'd also probably be like, you seem cool, I'm gonna do what you're doing. This was how Nathaniel would go on to become Scarlet Centurion. It was also later revealed that the time storm he was caught in was actually all done by Immortus, yet another time-divergent version of Kang. Apparently, Immortus created time storms to prevent Kang from creating certain alternate reality selves and to stop him from, I guess, tampering too much with the timeline. Often in comics, Kang's most dangerous enemy tends to be another version of Kang, and Immortus and Kang have definitely both acted against one another throughout their histories. Scarlet Centurion didn't quite work out for Kang as an identity. He ended up encountering the Avengers in the Avengers 1968 annual, and this would be similar to how his first ever comics appearance would go, in the sense that he would end up being pretty handily defeated here. This prompted him to abandon the Scarlet Centurion look and name and return once more to being Ramatut, which, after all, I suppose, had been much more successful in comparison, so that makes sense to me. As Ramatut, Nathaniel would once more attempt to return home to the future of the 30th century, but alas, more time storms. Ramatut goes to check the weather. Dang time storms, time storms, time storms, jeez! All weather channels are forecasting time storms all this week. Oh, how am I supposed to travel through time in this terrible weather? This is awful. Also, this weatherman, Mortis, he sure looks familiar to me. Oh well, whoever he is, he certainly is a handsome devil, I'll say that. Once more being tossed up in another time storm, Ramatut instead missed his stop in the 30th century, instead being catapulted even further into the future, into the 40th century. There, he discovered primitive beings fighting with sort of past technological weapons they no longer seem to fully understand. At this point, Ramatut fancied himself a sort of a master of past tech and weapons and figured, screw it, I could just rule these people. I have the knowledge to do it, so why wouldn't I? And so Nathaniel reinvented himself once more as Kang the Conqueror. Finally, we're there. He succeeded in conquering this far-flung future, not just the planet, but beyond, building his own galactic empire. However, Kang still found himself thinking back to the past and the modern era of Earth 616. Not fully satisfied with what he had accomplished here in the future, he set out to become the ruler of Earth 616 as well. It's also believed that his ambition to rule the time period of Earth 616 was also tied to the fact that he'd heard a tale of a celestial Madonna, who had become the mother of the most powerful man in all of known history. Basically, Kang wanted to become the baby daddy of that most powerful figure, which is kind of a weird thought when, like me, you know that the celestial Madonna turned out to be the hero Mantis, and that her baby would grow up to be the half-human, half-Kotati Sequoia, aka Koya, who recently was one of the main villains of the Empire event a few years back. I wonder if there's a future where instead of the Kotati resurrected version of Swordsman being that baby's dad, Kang is his dad instead? I would read that what if it does not yet exist. We'll have to wait to find out, as that is all the time we have for this video. We didn't explain as much as I wanted to, but we did explain how Kang came to be Kang, and some other identities he took up on his way to becoming the Conqueror that we all now know today. We now know what motivates him, even if it is a kind of a weird life goal, to be honest. Let us know down in the comments if you would like us to continue this history and recount some more of Kang's most convoluted attempts to conquer Earth, including his time as Victor Timely, which would be coming up next.
You ever think that one of your friends might be an alien in disguise? No? Well, they're thinking it about you! Welcome to Top 10 Nerd. I'm your host Andrew Boyd, and today I will be attempting to explain the plot of Marvel's Secret Invasion. That way, you can complain about the TV show not being comic accurate without having to go to the trouble of actually reading it. Let's dive in, starting with issue 1. Secret Invasion happens after the events of Civil War. In the aftermath of the conflict, Iron Man is the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. Captain America is dead, and the superheroes who are against registration are fugitives, working as the Secret Avengers, led by Luke Cage. Iron Man discovers that a Skrull has been impersonating Elektra. He learns that there is no way to know who the Skrulls are while they are alive, but once they're dead, they go back to their alien form. Fearing that this could be a sign of a coming invasion, he brings in Reed Richards and Hank Pym, who at this point in his career is going by Yellow Jacket, to study the alien corpse and hopefully discover a way to tell who is a Skrull and who is not. Before they can get into it, Iron Man gets word that a Skrull spacecraft is crash landing on Earth and will land in the Savage Lands. If you don't know what the Savage Lands are, it's basically a tropical island with dinosaurs that used to be Magneto's base of operations. Iron Man assembles the Avengers and sets off to investigate the crash, leaving Mr. Fantastic and Yellow Jacket to continue studying the alien. Not wanting to be left out of the loop, Luke Cage and the Secret Avengers steal a Quinjet and also go to the Savage Lands. Luke wants to tear open the ship to see what's inside, but Iron Man shows up and starts whining and trying to place Luke under arrest. Despite Carol Danvers, who at this point is going by Miss Marvel, not Captain Marvel, despite her trying to calm down Luke and Tony, the two factions of superheroes almost come to blows. Before this can happen, several Skrull sleeper agents begin their attack across the globe, taking out the Sword satellite, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, Thunderbolt's mountain, and sending the Baxter building into the negative zone. A Skrull, who has been posing as the Avengers' butler, Jarvis, uploads an alien virus to Tony's Iron Man suit, which disables his suit and also makes him sick. The crashed Skrull ship opens, revealing doubles of several superheroes, all claiming to be the real superheroes. Back in the lab, Mr. Fantastic thinks that he has uncovered a way to determine who is a Skrull and who is a human, But before he can reveal it, Hank Pym reveals himself to be a Skrull and shoots Richards, making him more of a wad of chewing gum than a man. And that brings us to Issue 2. Issue 2 is relatively uneventful, as it mostly comprises of the Avengers and the Secret Avengers teaming up to fight the mystery doubles who have arrived on the Skrull ship, while dealing with the paranoia of not knowing who they can trust and who is a Skrull in disguise. While this is happening, a group of Super Skrulls, Skrulls who have the powers of various superheroes, attack New York City and begin firing on civilians. Moving on to Issue 3. The SHIELD helicarrier has gone down in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. Maria Hill navigates her way through the bowels of the sinking airship, and when she reaches the deck, is greeted by the Skrull who has been impersonating Jarvis, who demands that she surrender. Yellow Jacket shows up at Camp Hammond, a training ground for newly registered heroes, and tells the Initiative that they need to prepare for the upcoming battle and go into New York to fight the Skrulls. In the city, the Young Avengers are locked in battle with the invading Skrulls, barely holding them off when the Initiative shows up to support the young heroes. Meanwhile, in the Savage Lands, Carol Danvers drops off Tony Stark at an abandoned lab to try and fix his suit, while she sets off for the city to try and help out there. So, Iron Man is by himself trying to deal with his suit and his illness when Spider-Woman shows up and reveals that she is actually the Empress of the Skrulls. She tells Tony that he is actually a Skrull sleeper agent who had their mind wiped, and that the events of Civil War were actually part of a plan to divide the heroes, making it easier to conquer the Earth. Tony, of course, finds this surprising and isn't sure what to believe. Is it better to be a smart invader who started a civil war to divide the heroes just in time for a massive invasion, or to be an allegedly really smart superhero who accomplishes the same thing by accident? Who's to say? Back in New York, the heroes are getting their butts kicked by the Skrull. They are being subdued, and Vision is getting his mind blown. Just when all seems lost, you know who shows up? Nick Fury rolls up with his brand new band of Howling Commandos, ready to kick those Skrulls to the curb. In issue 4, we learn that Mr. Fantastic is alive and is being held prisoner in space on one of the Skrull ships. Back in New York, the Howling Commandos, the Initiative, and the Young Avengers manage to beat back the invading Super Skrull. Miss Marvel, who, just remind you, is Carol Danvers at this point and not Kamala Khan, shows up, but Fury thinks she's a Skrull and shoots her with his energy gun, leaving her to be overwhelmed by Skrull. Back in the Savage Land, the Skrull Empress continues to try and convince Iron Man that he's a Skrull. Black Widow overhears this conversation, but is interrupted by the versions of Jean Grey and Beast who emerged from the crashed ship. She manages to take them out, and they are revealed to be Skrulls. The Spider-Woman Skrull escapes, and Black Widow talks to Tony and tells him that her spy instincts tell her he's not a Skrull, and that the Skrull Empress was just messing with him. Wolverine shows up, and the three heroes talk about their situation and agree that they need Mr. Fantastic. Meanwhile, in space, Agent Brand, the head of SWORD, is still alive, floating around in the cosmos. She manages to sneak on board and decides to mount a rescue mission to save Reed Richards. Back in New York, the Hood and his villainous friends watch the invasion on television. The Hood decides that they will prepare to intervene and help the heroes save Earth, as no Earth would be bad for business. Thor turns up with Captain America in tow, which is odd because we were all under the impression that he was dead. Issue 5. At Thunderbolt's Mountain. The Thunderbolts are being attacked by the Skrull who was impersonating Captain Marvel, the Kree warrior Mar-Vell, not Carol Danvers, who is Miss Marvel instead of Kamala Khan, who is no one at this point. The leader of the Thunderbolts, Norman Osborn, realizes that the Skrull can't bring himself to kill any of them. He talks to the Skrull and discovers that he was a sleeper agent who, until he was activated, truly believed himself to be the heroic Captain Marvel and is having trouble committing to the bad guy thing. Rather than continue attacking the Thunderbolts, Mar-Vell leaves. Nick Fury brings the heroes to his New York base, where they witness a broadcast where several Skrulls who have been posing as celebrities and world leaders give the people of Earth a really long-winded speech that essentially boils down to assimilate or be destroyed. Thankfully, back in space, Agent Brand has managed to rescue Mr. Fantastic on the Skrull ship. They fall under attack, but are saved by the Skrull Captain Marvel, who has decided that world domination is overrated. Brand and Richards make their way back to Earth to try and save the day. Back on the sinking SHIELD helicarrier, Agent Hill pulls a sneaky with a life model decoy and escapes the Skrull, blowing up the helicarrier in the process. Meanwhile, back in the Savage Lands, the heroes are all arguing about who is and isn't a Skrull when Brand and Reed show up in their spaceship. Reed fires a beam that reveals everyone's true form, making the heroes able to attack and defeat the secret invaders among them. By the way, Iron Man's not a Skrull. Leading us into Issue 6. Issue 6 opens with the Skrull who is posing as Mar-Vell, who goes by the superhero name Captain Marvel, because Carol Danvers is still Miss Marvel at this point in the continuity, who is not a Skrull. I'm getting lost. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. The Skrull dies in an explosion, but not before telling Marvel Boy that he must save the Earth. We see a montage of all the heroes over the globe fighting off the Skrull. Alpha Flight doesn't get a panel, but I'm assuming it's because they were having a fight so awesome that the writers thought that including it would overshadow the rest of the comic. Back in New York City, all the heroes who were in the Savage Lands team up with all the heroes who are fighting in the city to fight the Skrull forces. They are soon joined by Thor, Captain America, the Thunderbolts, as well as the Hood and the other villains. This unlikely team bands together and they take on the Skrull army. Issue 7. As the battle rages, Spider-Man remains optimistic, saying that things can't be too bad because the Watcher has not shown up. So anyway, the Watcher shows up, and the heroes and Skrulls continue to fight. In Avengers Tower, Jessica Jones, who at this point is married to Luke Cage and has a child, Danielle Cage, watches the battle on television with Jarvis. She decides that she needs to help her fellow heroes and leaves her child with Jarvis, not knowing that he is a Skrull in disguise. Marvel Boy joins the battle, and Clint Barton, who is in his Ronin phase at this point in continuity, manages to hit the Spider-Woman Skrull Empress with an arrow. It seriously injures her, but she does not die. Just when the Skrull forces seem beaten, they reveal their secret weapon. Turns out, before the secret invasion, the Skrull, posing as Hank Pym, had given Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, a growth formula that had been tampered with. They activate their plan, and as Wasp becomes giant, she becomes a giant chemical bomb, which is making all of the heroes deathly ill. In the final issue of the series, Thor is able to spin his hammer really fast, causing a tornado that is able to take out Janet before she causes any serious damage. This unfortunately kills her in the process. This of course leaves all the heroes really angry, and they prepare to attack the injured Skrull Empress. Before any of the heroes can make a move on her, Norman Osborn kills her with a gunshot to the head. The heroes take out the remaining Skrull ships and find a ship which contains all of the missing people the Skrulls have been impersonating. While this is happening, the Fantastic Four manage to close the Negative Zone portal, although the Baxter building has been pretty much destroyed. When the real Jarvis is found on the Skrull prisoner ship, Jessica Jones realizes her mistake and rushes back to Avengers Tower, only to realize that the Skrull Jarvis is gone and has taken her baby with him. Tony tries to chum it up with Thor after the battle, but the God of Thunder is having none of it, and tells Tony he considers him responsible for the invasion, as he had divided the heroes with the Civil War and failed to prevent the invasion despite being the leader of SHIELD and the Avengers. This sentiment is echoed by the President, who fires Stark and replaces him with the man who saved the Earth from the Skrull Empress, Norman Osborn. The President puts SHIELD and the Avengers under the Thunderbolts banner and gives Osborn control of the entire operation. This of course thrills Norman, who meets up with some of his supervillain pals to plot and scheme about how they are going to use their new power. Well, that is the plot of Secret Invasion. It's a fun read with plenty of crossover issues that we haven't gotten into here, but are definitely worth checking out.
We know it's coming in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but what really is Secret Wars? And how secret is it? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. I'm your host, Amanda McKnight, and today I'll be your guide for this video where we talk about one of the most anticipated events in the MCU that was previously known in the comics as one of the most wild events that we've gotten in recent years. Join me and hold on to your hats as I attempt to explain Secret Wars. While we'll be focusing on the 2015 Secret Wars event, it is important to note, in the effort to avoid, any major confusion, if you are looking for Secret Wars books, to read or anything like that, this isn't the only Secret Wars event. It's not even the only one from Marvel. Secret Wars prior to 2015 was a 1984 12-issue crossover event, where the heroes and villains of Earth were teleported to a distant world, dubbed Battle World by none other than the all-powerful Beyonder. The Beyonder had grown curious about the superheroes of Earth and wanted to learn more about their potential. On Battleworld, the Beyonder provided various different alien weapons and tech and promised bountiful rewards to whosoever was the first to slay their enemy. The original Secret Wars was written by Jim Shooter with art by Mike Zeck and Bob Layton. The 2015 event would share some similarities to the original, but ultimately be its own separate story. The main series was a 9-issue miniseries, and creators of the 2015 event are Jonathan Hickman and Asad Rabish. Secret Wars spun out of the Infinity and Time Runs Out story arcs, which had all been building to this since pretty much 2013, with some wheels being put in motion even further back than that as well. During Infinity, Earth-stationed superheroes faced off against Thanos, who they believed was searching for Infinity Gems, or as they're known now, the Infinity Stones, when really he was searching for his mysterious son, Thane. Meanwhile, in space, our heroes joined with various empires across the cosmos to combat a new, seemingly unstoppable alien enemy, claiming to be the creators of almost all planet-based life, known as the Builders. During Time Runs Out, it would be revealed to everyone that the Builders had actually been destroying worlds because of incoming incursions, believing that the universe was basically flawed and needed to be rebuilt. Incursions happen when two or more worlds collide together, destroying all that are involved. The coming incursions were causing the destruction of worlds across the multiverse as they collided with one another, and it turned out Earth 616 was also at risk of this. Time Runs Out was about finding a way to avoid its destruction and, in the end, finally confront, accept, and kinda just prepare for it. When Secret Wars starts, Molecule Man, Doctor Strange, and Doctor Doom face off against the Beyonders, while the rest of the universe of Earth 616 and Earth 1610 prepare for the final incursion, with the two worlds set to collide with one another. Two major forces are leading the side of Earth 1610, the Maker with his Children of Tomorrow and Nick Fury leading S.H.I.E.L.D. And they're also kind of working together, but also kinda not. Earth 616, meanwhile, was mostly reduced at this point to infighting and preparing their own life raft to preserve the lives of those considered most valuable to the planet and to the life raft's constructor, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. The Maker and the Cabal had copied the design of this life raft as well, each creating their own in turn. This will be especially relevant later on in the story, so make sure you note that. As it approached the final incursion point, Earth 616's life raft suffered a hull breach, and the Richards family, minus Reed, was separated and seemingly destroyed as the inevitable final incursion destroyed both universes. And Reed was pretty heartbroken over it too. He was like, "Not my family! Tried really hard." Following the destruction of both worlds, we'd get a time skip where readers would be teleported to a completely different world 8 years in the future. Although we wouldn't know that till later. A world known as Battleworld that is ruled by God Emperor Doom and his Sheriff Strange, along with their own multiversal police force, the Thor Corps. Doom also has the Foundation, who are dedicated to exploration and science instead of keeping the peace and enforcing the law. The Foundation is made up of Doom's family, led by his daughter Valeria Von Doom, with its team roster also including his son, Franklin Von Doom. Doom's wife and the mother of his children here is also Susan Von Doom. She's not part of the Foundation, I don't think. She's just there and she's still super cool. The patchwork Battleworld was seemingly created by God Emperor Doom, using bits and pieces from all the realities in the multiverse, but rebuilt in his own image. Battleworld would later be designated as Earth 15513. It appeared as though no one here remembered their life previous to their existence in this world, forgetting whatever life they had in whatever previous reality they hailed from. And in fact, this reality was also considered to be kind of the new main continuity, as we just previously learned that Earth 616 had ended. God Emperor Doom's Battleworld is also split up into various regions, with many of them centered around a specific category of hero, or simply a specific hero or a specific multiversal world, repurposed as a province in this patchwork new reality, or a region. There is a whole map that lists all of them, but for the sake of time, I'm just gonna briefly mention some of the key ones in relation to the main story of Secret Wars. Some of the important regions included Higher Avalon, the Kingdom of Utopolis, Bar Sinister, Doomstat or Castle Doom, the Kingdom of Manhattan, the Deadlands, and the Isle of Agamotto. We learned of civil unrest in Battleworld, with multiple people potentially plotting against God Emperor Doom, hoping to usurp him or to defeat him. We discovered that the Foundation found a raft, presenting it to Sheriff Strange and the Thor Corps to investigate it. This raft was mysteriously found to be older than time itself, at least older than time on Battleworld, which everyone thought was, all there had ever been, and which they believed was exclusively brought into existence by the might and will of God Doom. Which, it kinda was, but it wasn't as old as they thought it was. It was said that Doom himself created the light that gave birth to all life. The raft that was discovered turned out to be the life raft of the Cabal. Thanos emerged from it and inquired as to where exactly they had ended up. He also did a bit of killing of people. That's the Cabal for you. Sheriff Strange made some reports to Doom before returning to the life raft to investigate the death of one of the Thor Corps, killed by, of course, as I said, the Cabal. He had sent the Thor Corps to quarantine and further investigate the raft after learning of its existence from Valeria and the Foundation. During his investigation into the murder, he found another surprising survivor in the life raft, Miles Morales, Spider-Man of Earth 1610. Yo, hey Miles, how you doing? Meanwhile, Doom revealed to Sue that he was doubting himself and his ability to act as the god the Battleworld needed and deserved. Sheriff Strange takes Miles to his Sanctum Sanctorum, here known as the Isle of Agamotto. Here Strange reveals that another life raft was found 3 years prior, which, it turns out, carried the survivors of Earth 616. Hey! Strange also reveals that he is one of the few people who know what is really going on, and the Battleworld is not actually as old as time at all, and he knows that. But it's really only 8 years old. That's when we found that out, coming into existence following the final incursion and destruction of the multiverse. Back on the Kingdom of Utopolis, where the Cabal's life raft was found, the Thor Corps continue to hunt them and eventually find and engage the Cabal in combat. Strange also reveals what really happened at the beginning of the story when he, Doom, and Molecule Man are seen facing off against the Beyonders. Turns out they were able to defeat them, and Doom ended up taking the power of the Beyonders for himself and using it to build his battle world. This battle world, making himself the god and the emperor of it. This revelation inspires everyone eventually to turn on Doom, but when a Phoenix-empowered Cyclops from Earth 616 stands against Doom, even his power proves not strong enough to defeat him. Phoenix is not going to bail us out of this one. Later, Sheriff Strange is confronted for betraying God Doom. Strange taunts Doom, claiming that Doom is afraid of the Earth 616 survivor Reed Richards, his sworn enemy. Doom, in response, kills his right hand Strange. That's what you do when someone's like, I think you're just jealous. You're dead. Well, especially if you say that to Doom. He will just kill you dead. Doom holds a funeral for Sheriff Strange, but does not reveal the details of his death because obviously that would be suspicious, and does not give a reason either as to why he needs the Foundation to pursue the survivors from the raft who have since disappeared into hiding on Battleworld. He publicly blames them for Strange's death, but cannot explain how they escaped what would be his wrath in this instance. After all, he is a god. They shouldn't have been able to just get away, right? His own daughter, Valeria, even seems suspicious of this and definitely clocks it. This is the beginning of her suspicions on her father. Later, it is revealed that Doom's power comes through Molecule Man. Doom had been killing Molecule Men across the multiverse in preparation for the final incursion, in order to gain enough power to defeat the Beyonders. While he succeeded in doing so, the main reality Molecule Man was needed as he acted as a conduit for the Beyonders' power, helping to feed it constantly to Doom, maintaining in essence his godlike power level and abilities. Molecule Man warns Doom that Strange's death could be the beginning of the end for him. He's like, things are gonna unravel, I see it. Could be a thing coming, watch out. Also, bring me food. Please bring me food. The Foundation continues to search for the survivors of the rafts, some of which we learn have successfully infiltrated various regions of Battleworld, like Jane Foster's Thor, who managed to sneak onto the Thor Corps to create dissent from within. Flash forward 3 weeks, Battleworld is getting more chaotic as more and more people rebel against the God Emperor, with a secret rival appearing and a mysterious leader known only as the Prophet. While the hunt continues for the survivors of the rafts, only a few have been caught so far. Valeria learns of the source of her father's power and begins to become even more suspicious of him. However, later when the two Spider-Men, Peter Parker of Earth 616 and Miles Morales of Earth 1610, are sent by the two Reeds of Earth 616 and of course of Earth 1610 to infiltrate Castle Doom and find the source of Doom's power, Valeria, upon running into them, chooses not to join them for fear of the truth that, she'll likely uncover. She doesn't want to be suspicious of her dad, she just kinda is, The Spider-Men find Owen Reese, Molecule Man, and upon asking if they have anything for him to eat, Miles offers him a cheeseburger that he'd been keeping in his pocket. A kindness that will be super important later. After wolfing down the burger, Owen confesses upon being questioned by them that he is the force that fuels Doom's power source if you will. Finally, a full-scale rebellion rises up from all sides with Thanos tearing down the shield, which is an alternate version of the Thing, turns out, who is convinced to collapse at Thanos' behest, the Prophet, who is revealed to be Maximus the Mad of the Inhumans, marching his army towards Castle Doom, Baron Sinister rebelling against his own Baroness, the Goblin Queen, and fellow nobles to fight against Doom, Baron Maestro also planning to secretly turn on Doom after defeating the rebels with his World Breakers, and even of course the Thor Corps, Doom's own police force, turning against Doom with mighty Thor Jane Foster leading them in arms. In the Deadlands, Namor and Black Panther also rise up, with Black Panther leading a zombie army as King of the Dead. Star-Lord also joins the fight and helps to destroy Castle Doom by using a smaller splinter of Groot on the magical tree above the throne room, Yggdrasil, which transforms it into a giant, destructive Groot. I am Groot. So cool. Later, the Thing as the Shield sacrifices himself when he does battle with Franklin Von Doom, who controls basically his own Galactus, allowing himself to be defeated and killed by Franklin as Galactus after learning in this reality that Franklin is actually Susan's son, and still holding love for Susie even in this reality, even across the multiverse. This prompts Valeria to reveal the truth of this reality and how Doom truly got his power to her mother Susan. During all of this, Earth 616 Reed Richards and his Earth 1610 alternate, the Maker, use the battle as a distraction to sneak in and attempt to find Doom's power source themselves. God Emperor Doom easily kills Thanos before being temporarily struck down by the arrival of Namor, an Infinity Gauntlet wielding Black Panther, and of course their zombie horde. Meanwhile, the two Reeds find Owen Reese, who also asks them for something to eat, but unfortunately they have nothing to give him. The Maker attempts to betray his 616 counterpart, only for Molecule Man to intervene, freeing Reed and striking down the Maker. After Doom defeats Black Panther by destroying the Infinity Gauntlet, he realizes all this has been a distraction and heads to the chamber where Molecule Man is kept. Molecule Man also asks Doom if he has brought him anything to eat, which he of course also hasn't. Molecule Man thus declares that Reed and Doom are on equal ground in his eyes, neither of them had anything for him to eat, and the two begin to fight against one another. Reed claims that Doom could have done a better job with Battleworld, but his fear of losing it prevented him from doing so. Doom likewise calls out Reed for thinking he could have done a better job with the power Doom had. Reed admits that he did think kinda just that he would have done better in Doom's shoes. And Doom agrees that Reed likely would have done a better job as he gets ready to condemn Reed to death. But because both men agreed and Molecule Man is still right here watching all this, he decides to give the power of the Beyonders over to Reed from Doom, destroying Battleworld in the process in a blinding white light. As everything fades to white, we learn the world has seemingly returned to normal, opening on Black Panther in Wakanda, who is surprised and happy to learn that the plan to defeat Doom actually worked. A few minor changes, however, are revealed as time moves forward in this new main continuity, such as Miles Morales moving over to Earth 616 with his family being all brought along with him, all of them now alive and well, as opposed to being in the now destroyed Ultimate Universe, and as opposed to having his mom be dead, because that's what was going on before. This is revealed to be because Molecule Man claimed he owed Miles for the burger that he'd given him. As I said, it would be important. The Future Foundation and Fantastic Four journey across the multiverse, creating and mapping out various worlds and universes as they restore all of the realities, rebuilding together as a team and as a family. Reed oversees the rebuilding with major help from Molecule Man and his own son Franklin Richards. Doom is also brought back to life and is seen in his castle in Latveria. He would be given the belief that the Fantastic Four, and specifically Reed Richards, were dead, and as he took off his mask, we would see that his scars were healed, completely gone, as he began to laugh.
With Ant-Man Quantumania taking place almost entirely inside the quantum realm of the MCU, today on Top 10 Nerd, I'm going to try to attempt to explain the microscopic world and the role it plays in the MCU. I'm Adam Andrews, and let's take a dive into the microverse. The quantum realm, or as it's called in the comic books, the microverse, first appeared all the way back in Captain America Comics number 26 from March 1943, in a story called The Princess in the Atom, where Cap and Bucky travel to a subatomic world known as Mita. This story was actually a knockoff of a science fiction story written by Ray Cummings called The Girl in the Golden Atom. The microverse really properly showed up in the form we commonly know it as in the comics, though, in Fantastic Four number 16. Now in Fantastic Four number 10, a few issues earlier, Dr. Doom tried tried to bring down the Fantastic Four by using a shrink ray on them that would reduce them to nothingness, but he accidentally got blasted by the ray himself. Instead of shrinking to nothingness, he had entered into a microscopic world, one that he naturally conquered because he's Dr. Doom and he's awesome. With this initial foray into the micro world, stories could now repeatedly be written that would introduce new villains like the Psycho Man. The Silver Surfer took a trip to the microverse to hide from Galactus, who was trying to get his Herald back, and probably one of the most famous microverse stories revolved around the Hulk, who was shrunk down and became king of a microverse world where he met one of his biggest loves, a princess named Jarella. The microverse of the comics is a whole universe with its own planets. This includes Homeworld, which is a chain planet that is home to Calicalac, which is inhabited by insect-like species of Homeworld, and Spartak, which is a rocky world and home to the Acro Years. There is the space wall, which separates the Spiral Path universe from the other dimensions and the rest of the microverse, and then we have a few other places. Mita is a microverse planet which is home to the Mitans, but was destroyed. There's the planet Kai, which is inhabited by these green-skinned people, which is a cool kind of fantasy world, and it's where the Hulk went when he was shrunk down. There's Paradise 3 and then Subatomica, which is where the villain Psycho Man is from, and that has a few key places like Talk, home of the Lizard Men, Tran, which is specifically where Psycho Man was the chief scientist, Merwood, which is where Dr. Doom ended up, and then there's Bazik and Kor. Whether these exist in the MCU is another question altogether, but Krylar, who's played by Bill Murray in the upcoming Quantumania, is the governor of a city called Axia inside the Quantum Realm, so that is a new one. Now, it wasn't until 1979 that the microverse was really defined as the microverse. In Micronauts number 1, we are introduced to a bunch of new microverse heroes, including the lead of the book, Commander Rand, who woke up after 1,000 years to help lead a rebellion in the microverse against the evil Baron Karza. This comic book is based on the Mego toy line of the same name, which was, in turn, based on the Japanese toy line Microman. The toy series was about rebels fighting against the evil Baron Karza in the microverse. Now, Marvel doesn't own the actual rights to the microverse itself and just the characters that they created. They can continue to make comic book stories with those characters and that location, and every now and again it does indeed pop up in the comics, but when it comes to movies, it's a different story, and that's the reason that in the MCU, the microverse is now referred to as the Quantum Realm, which is a name coined by the scientific advisor that worked on the films, who actually pretty much invented everything for this world in the MCU. The microverse or Quantum Realm actually plays a much more significant role in the MCU than it does in the comic books. But before we jump headfirst into all of that, let's answer the question, what actually is the microverse? The microverse or Quantum Realm is essentially a whole dimension of its own that can be accessed from our regular old Earth dimension by shrinking ourselves so far down past a certain point that we are forced through an artificially created nexus into the parallel universe. Other sources have said that the microverse exists within atoms themselves, like how in Dr. Seuss the Grinch, the Who's live on a snowflake. This was the case for the very first appearance in Captain America, and while that is a cool idea and seems kind of logical, more often than not, its real proper introduction, the realm is described as a parallel dimension. One article I read described it as a Russian doll of universes, and I think that's the best way you can describe it, a world beneath our own. Now, in the MCU, there has actually been a really large amount of mentioning of the Quantum Realm, and not just in the Ant-Man movies, although Ant-Man is primarily where we find the most real information. It all starts with Hank Pym, who created his Pym particles from subatomic extra-dimensional particles, which allows someone to either shrink or expand their physical body to extreme sizes. Which sounds to me that the Pym particles are quantum in their nature. Hank Pym also spent many years trying to harness the incredible power of quantum energy as part of his time studying the quantum realm. The microscopic dimension became an obsession of his following his wife Janet Van Dyne's disappearance. She went subatomic to stop a nuclear warhead without a way to reverse her shrinking process. That's why he warned Scott Lang repeatedly about messing with his suit's regulator to avoid being lost forever in the quantum realm, a place where, quote, all concepts of time and space become irrelevant. That part is important. But at the end of the first Ant-Man movie, Scott went subatomic anyways to save his daughter Cassie, and he entered the quantum realm, or what I think is that he got as far as you can go before entering the quantum realm. As he shrunk, he passed through smaller and smaller worlds, each beautiful and haunting in in its own way. When Scott finally stopped shrinking, he arrived in an empty, dark void dotted with only a few specks of light and all these weird things going on. But his suit is out of juice, so he couldn't go any further. Instead, thanks to his willpower and modifying his suit with the enlarging discs he carried, Scott was able to grow back to where he could return to our world. Now, after Scott's return from where he should have been lost forever, Hank Pym and his daughter Hope Van Dyne built a portal to reach the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Their quantum tunnel made it possible to send someone to a specific coordinate within the quantum realm. Now, during the very brief moment they opened the tunnel in their lab, Scott received a message from Janet Van Dyne sent to him from across dimensions. That's because Scott's previous short-lived journey to the subatomic world made him become, quote, quantumly entangled with Janet, meaning their minds shared a direct telepathic connection to one another. So, Janet Van Dyne had indeed survived in the quantum realm for 30 years, and the quantum entanglement was Janet's way of being able to, quote, speak through Scott and share exactly when and where they could find her in the quantum realm. Now, another part of that movie is Ava Starr, Ghost, who almost ruined their rescue from the quantum realm. A tremendous amount of quantum energy hit a young Ava when her father's own quantum tunnel exploded. That made Ghost quantumly unstable. This chaotic state means that Ava exists in, quote, multiple parallel realities at the same time, allowing her to pass through objects otherwise known as quantum phasing. Also, because of the quantum energy she absorbed, when she focuses hard enough to actually touch things, her kicks and punches hit much harder than someone who is normal. This quantum energy is absorbed by people who are in the quantum realm for long periods of time, and it can grant them abilities. Bill Foster's plan was to fix Ava by stealing all of the quantum energy that is stored within Janet in the quantum realm, but he was a villain, so it wasn't gonna work out. Either way, Hank eventually makes it into the quantum realm, initially ending up in the same place Scott did when he shrunk down to save Cassie, but Hank then shrinks even smaller, which takes him to the insanely colorful landscape of the quantum realm. Hank initially began phasing like Ghost does, but Janet, having absorbed so much energy, was able to pass some energy onto Hank and stabilize him with a simple touch. Basically, this shows that the more time someone spends in the quantum realm, the more powerful they become, evolving abilities and powers. When they returned back to Earth, Janet could connect to others through her quantum abilities, and she also stabilized Ghost, but not permanently, which is why Scott went into the quantum realm being warned of not getting stuck in a, quote, time vortex. And because of Thanos' snap, he got stuck for 5 years of our time, but 5 hours of his time, leading to the events of Avengers Endgame. Time and space are so different in the MCU's quantum realm that it's basically impossible to comprehend the real world time and location. But when Scott returned back to Earth with the discrepancy of 5 hours versus 5 years, it gave a massive clue to understanding how time differs in the quantum realm, which allowed Bruce Banner, and eventually Tony Stark, to figure out how to map out time through the quantum realm, turning the realm into a time machine. By using time tunnels in the quantum realm, the Avengers were able to go back in time and collect the Infinity Stones needed to undo the snap. But now the question a lot of people are wondering is how this connects to Kang the Conqueror, and why is he in the quantum realm? With the information from Ant-Man and the Avengers, plus things learned in season 1 of Loki, we can make a guess. So all the way back in the 31st century, an Earth scientist named Nathaniel Richards discovered how to travel between alternate worlds. Eventually, so did the variants of him from alternate Earths. While many of them worked together, others didn't want to play ball, and wanted to use this powerful ability to conquer. The opposing viewpoints resulted in an all-out multiversal war that threatened the very existence of everything. That is, until the original Nathaniel ultimately defeated his variants and won the war after he discovered the monster Alioth. Dubbing himself He Who Remains, he used the creature Alioth to guard his secret citadel, from which he created the TVA to oversee the sacred timeline composed of the realities collected by He Who Remains, making sure that no realities deviate from the timeline and making sure his other variants are kept at bay. The Citadel exists outside of the sacred timeline, aka outside of time and space, in a swirling world of blue and purple color, which sounds and looks a hell of a lot like the quantum realm, a place where the normal rules of time also don't apply. On top of this, and this is where speculation starts to come into play, the quantum realm, with its own civilization, is almost a perfect place to imprison an enemy who can threaten the sacred timeline for all of infinity. Someone like Kang the Conqueror, for example. A person you'd want to keep close by in order to keep an eye on them and make sure they never escape. Now, part of the TVA's main job was pruning the variants of other individuals in the sacred timeline that break their set timeline, creating an offshoot of the timeline that could threaten it all and lead to another multiversal war. Essentially, this removes free will from individuals who don't even know they're doing anything wrong, which is why Loki and Sylvie, who were set to be removed for breaking the sacred timeline's rules, go against the TVA, going all the way to the citadel of He Who Remains, and then Sylvie kills him. When this happened, He Who Remains assumed it would lead to another multiversal war that played out exactly how it had before, with him being victorious. But that's not what happened. Instead, one of his variants came out on top, and they were now in charge of the TVA, changing the memories of the TVA's workers, but not Loki or Sylvie, as they were outside the sacred timeline when He Who Remains died. Now, if this is true, then the Kang the Conqueror appearing in Quantumania could be this new Nathaniel Richards that won the new multiversal war, and is now trying to invade and conquer the other timelines using the quantum realm as his base of operations, with its citizens and civilizations either standing with him as his army or rebelling against the powerful conqueror.
What exactly is the Spider-Verse? And how do we even begin to try and quantify it? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to try to do just that in this video. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. Today we are diving into the Spider-Verse and attempting to explain it. Oh boy. This is going to be more challenging than the Marvel Multiverse and the Summers Family Tree combined. Okay, we only have so much time, so let's get to whipping through this great web. To understand the Spider-Verse, you need to somewhat understand the Marvel Multiverse. A brief synopsis for those of you who may be unfamiliar. The Marvel Multiverse is the idea that within Marvel Comics, multiple worlds exist. Extending even beyond that, both DC and Marvel seem to have also expressed an understanding of an even bigger concept beyond their own publishing houses, the idea of the Omniverse, of which the Marvel Multiverse is only a small part of. The Omniverse makes up everything, including other fictional multiverses, the real world universe, and even potentially, if it exists, the real world multiverse. Within Marvel, there are various different worlds, each born out of some kind of central idea, whether this be a concept such as if a hero or villain had made a different choice at a key moment, or if a character existed in a different time period, or even just if a different person became one of the well-known titular heroes instead of the version we are used to from the main continuity Marvel comic book universe of Earth 616. Say for example, if someone else other than Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Enter the Spider-Verse. But where do we start? I suppose the best place would be at the beginning with Spider-Man's travels into the multiverse. One of the first times that Spider-Man intentionally traveled to an alternate reality, not just an alternate future or another dimension, seems to have been with the Knights of Pendragon in the second volume of their own series from 1992, which seems fitting considering Marvel UK and Captain Britain's connection to the introduction of the multiverse concept in the comics. In issue number 8 of Knights of Pendragon, Spider-Man joins them to fight against the Scourge, arachnoids which are monstrous, spider-like beings that remind Peter Parker of his own reality's Venom. While these aren't specifically alternate Spider-Men, there would be a few occasions where Spider-Man would interact with and even team up with alternate versions of himself. For some, the concept of the multiverse means that if you can dream it, it likely can and does exist. I personally like this idea of the multiverse, which operates on the rule of if it's possible, it's true. It just opens up a lot more potential and paints the multiverse as limitless, which I find fascinating. So the idea of me just imagining a world where I am Spider-Girl or a world where I never made this video at all, both now exist because I thought of it, and likely always did. But my thinking of them just made their existence more evident. Does that make sense to you? Applying this kind of thinking to the multiverse means that dream sequences that aren't direct flashbacks are all multiversal realities or possibilities, like what was proposed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where all dreams are seen as windows into alternate realities and variants of ourselves. If this rings true to you, one of the first appearances of alternate reality Spider-Man that Peter of Earth 616 interacts with happened in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number -1, which takes place before Peter became a hero, with him being shown as reading his Uncle Ben's comics and daydreaming of what he'd be like as a hero, featuring alternate versions of him that are like various different heroes from the publishing house that Marvel used to be known as, Timely Comics. including classic versions of heroes Angel, Human Torch, Vision, and Wizard. Pretty cool stuff. Also love that callback. In terms of when Spider-Man first teamed up with alternate versions of himself though, like we see in the animated Sony film Into the Spider-Verse, this actually happened also in another animated world, possibly an extension of the animated Marvel Multiverse, which also contains within it the animated Miles Morales' Spider-Man's Earth from Into the Spider-Verse, and more. Spider-Man first teamed up with variations of himself in the famous 90s Spider-Man cartoon. This actually happened near the end of the show when the final arc forced Spider-Man to team up with alternate reality versions of himself from across the multiverse to defeat a super evil alternate version of Spidey known as Spider Carnage. Spider Carnage is so cool. Which is interesting because this instance likely went on to inspire further expansion of the Spider-Verse in the comics, and Peter's team-ups with other Spider heroes, such as Spider-Man 2099's Miguel O'Hara and the Ultimate Universe's Miles Morales, who would also become Spider-Man. Until eventually we got our very own story based around the idea of a multiverse where various Spider-themed heroes, variants of Spider-Man, existed and would have to come together as we ventured into the Spider-Verse. But where did the term Spider-Verse even come from? This terminology came about with the comic story known simply as Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse was a 2014 Amazing Spider-Man crossover event. This story would not only introduce us to various different Spider people that we'd never met before, but would also introduce the concept of how all the variant Spider folks were connected to one another through the great web of life and destiny. With this video, we're more focused on explaining exactly what the Spider-Verse is and who is in it, as opposed to the specifics of this story. But if that's something you want to hear more on, let us know in the comments, and be sure to click that like button too while you're down there. Spider-Verse was actually at the beginning of this story and would actually lead to follow-up Spider-based crossover events, but more on those later. When it comes to the actual verse itself, what did we learn from the Spider-Verse series? What defines the Spider-Verse? What is it exactly? Why does it exist? And what connects all these versions of Spider-Man across the multiverse? It's like a giant web be connecting all the dots. Well, we learned that although Spider-Man's origins seem random, that Peter was actually somewhat fated to become an arachnid-themed hero. Whether you like that or not, that is the thing that we learned. Spider-Verse claimed to feature every single living Spider-themed individual that we'd ever seen up to that point, also introducing us to many new variations on the character. Though it claimed to include everyone, a few variations had to be left out due to some copyright issues, namely the version from the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series from 2008. In the story, Spider-themed heroes ended up finding one another, joining together from across the multiverse to unite against the multiversal threat of Morlun and the Inheritors, a family of multiversal space vampires who love wearing Victorian clothes and devouring the life force energy of Spider-based heroes everywhere. True story. Spider-Verse also introduced the multiversal Spider-themed hero team known as the Web Warriors, which would continue on their adventures together even after the initial Spider-Verse story concluded, at least for a bit. The Web Warriors and a masked Spider army would accrue various devices, including an amulet given to Spider UK by Roma that allowed them to travel through the web of life and destiny to other worlds. But what is the great web of life and destiny anyways? We would learn across the Spider-Verse stories that the web is sometimes referred to as the Great Web, the Web of Life, or the Web of Life and Destiny, connects to all various worlds in the multiverse. In fact, it is intrinsically tied to the fabric of reality and the existence of the multiverse itself. Harming the web can cause damage to the multiverse. We also learned that the nodules that connect the strands of the web that make it up are the totems within the web, spread across various worlds, acting as their totemic spider heroes and protectors. The web is also tied to a key power of spider totems, their spider sense, which is weakened across the multiverse if the web is weakened or damaged. Without a spider hero, worlds seem to become vulnerable and in some cases are even completely destroyed. More prominent totems have names and are often attached to hosts, people who end up getting spider-like powers. The main three we know of are the Other, initially attached to Kane in the Spider-Verse story, the Bride, initially attached to Silk in that story, and Scion, initially attached to Benji Parker of the MC2 Earth 982, brother of Mayday Parker. Solus, the father of the Inheritor family, once described the Great Web as being everything and everywhere. It is watched over by the Master Weaver, who can manipulate it somewhat, but mainly looks works to monitor, maintain, and guard it, also known as the spider deity. There must always be a master weaver at the center of the web. Now we know what the Great Web is and what spider totems are. It's time to answer the question, who are the spider totems? When it comes to the Spider-Verse, there isn't just one crossover event that has happened to explore this concept. No. Nor is there just one series. The initial crossover cracked the gates wide open for a flood of multiversal spider totems to pour in with multiple different tie-ins, ending up as a massive and epic ongoing event. And the idea continued to expand with follow-up events and series centered around the Spider-Verse. The first event was the Spider-Verse, which we already have touched on. It claimed to feature all of the alternate versions of Spider-Man who had ever appeared. As much as I'd love to go into detail on each one, there is more Spider-Verse to get through, so I don't really have time for that. Instead, I'm going to highlight a couple of my favorites who I think are pretty important to the overall story. One is Spider UK, whose world, Earth 833, was actually destroyed during the Spider-Verse event, though not necessarily as a result of it. Spider UK is William Braddock, and he is basically like Captain Britain combined with Spider-Man. In fact, he was considered an alternate of both Brian Braddock and Peter Parker. He would survive Spider-Verse and go on to lead the Web Warriors after, who took on the mission of protecting worlds across the multiverse who had lost their spider totems in the fight. Another important character who doesn't get hyped enough in my opinion is Anya Corazon, aka Aranya. She hails from the main reality of Earth 616, and her powers were initially linked to the realm of mysticism. They were given to her by Miguel, a sorcerer of the Spider Society, who saw potential in Anya after she endangered her own life in an attempt to save his. She was crucial in the Spider-Verse event when it came to understanding prophetic scrolls given to the Spider Army by the Master Weaver, which helped them to actually win the day here. Now her powers are a copy of Peter's following the events of Spider Island, but in the Spider-Verse event, her somewhat unique origin and power set was not only highlighted, but actually crucial, and I personally miss it, so there you go. Other spider totems that appeared in Spider-Verse include Peter Parquois, Otto Octavius' Superior Spider, Cyborg Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, Six-Armed Spider-Man, Spider-Monkey, Ashley Barton from the Old Man Logan universe, Assassin Spider-Man, an alternate version of I-Pac from Earth 1771, Spider-Gwen, who is now known as Ghost Spider, Aaron Eichmann's The Spider-Man, Patton Parnell, Penny Parker's Spider, Spider-Ham, Ezekiel Sims' Old Spider-Man, Exile's Miguel O'Hara, Time Storm's Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, aka The Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man of Earth 1983, Spider-Cat, Counter-Earth Spider-Man, Spider-Man of Earth 7831, Spider-Girl, now known as Spider-Woman from the MC2 reality, her brother Benji Parker, Peter Parker Spider-Man of Earth 616, Silk, Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman, Kane Parker aka the Scarlet Spider at that time, Bruce Banner's Spider-Man from Bullet Points, Cosmic Spider-Man, Spider-Man of Earth 9105, Miles Morales' Spider-Man of Earth 1610, Spider-Punk, Ben Reilly, Ultimate Spider-Woman known as Black Widow at that time, Spider-Wolf, Ultimate Spider-Man from the animated series, Flash Thompson's Captain Spider, Spider-Man from the 90s animated series, the Prince of Arachne, Arachnosaur, Mangaverse Spider-Man, Spider-Man J, Takayuya Yamashiro's Spider-Man, Lady Spider, Uncle Ben's Spider-Man, Ben Reilly's Spider-Man of Earth 94, Spider-Man from the Hostess Cakes ads, Penelope Parker, Comic Strip Spider-Man, Marvel vs. Capcom Spider-Man, Anansi, Arachnido, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, Spider-Man from the Broadway musical, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, Educational Spider-Man from the 1970s Electric Company skits, the once comatose Man Spider who was later cured, 60s animated Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Goblin, Aunt May's Spider-Man, Spider-Man India, and Julian Carpenter's Madam Web. That's a lot of spider totems. Did you get all that? There'll be a test later. Even more would be featured in the follow-up story, Spider-Geddon, which pit the spider totems once more against the Inheritors, who after being defeated in Spider-Verse managed to return, because ain't that just the way. Spider-Geddon also included PS4 Spider-Man Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson's Spinneret, the crime-fighting team Spider-Pete and his uncle Spider-Ben, Spiders-Man, Octavia Otto, Web-Slinger and his horse Widow, Norman Osborn's Spider-Man, Astro Spider, Spider, Spider-Kid, Spider-Man of Earth 18199, PS4 Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Cop, and Spider-Lang. In the series Vault of Spiders, we'd also meet George Stacy's the Spider, the Savage Spider-Man, and Margot's Spider-Bite, one of my favorites, not to be confused with Spider-Man's sidekick for a day, Spider-Bite, who is also super cool. It's a different bite, it's a bite with a Y versus a bite with an I. In another Spider-Verse series from 2019, we'd see additional totems including Spider-Zero, a yet unknown alternate Spider-Man, Cosmic Miles Morales' Captain Universe, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, the Spider-Man, Spider-Gang, Spider-Monster, Lord Spider, May Parker's Carnage, ally of May's Carnage, Miles Morales, also of Earth 20143, a ton of alternate Spider-Mams, Spinster, Piratey Sea Spider, Sea Requiem, Garden Spider, Spider-Sting, V, Sun Spider, Spider, and White Widow. The story continues! The Spider-Verse was conceptualized by Dan Slott, who was also the writer of the core story. Prior to the crossover event, Slott had also worked on another project that saw various Spider-Men interact, the video game from 2010, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And there were a few other projects with other writers that led up to Spider-Verse in the comics, also involving alternate Spider-Man teaming up together and including Edge of Spider-Verse, a 5-issue miniseries. The first of its name, but not the last, that's for sure. In this series, it became common for each issue in the series to introduce a new alternate version of Spider-Man, focusing on their world and their story. Coming our way soon will be what is said to be the final chapter in the saga started by the Spider-Verse, known as the End of the Spider-Verse. This story is expected to be coming soon, and prior to that, we have also gotten a series leading up to it with the second volume of Edge of Spider-Verse. This series features new totems such as Night Spider, Hunter Spider, Spider-Laird, and Spider-Rex. The Spider-Verse also became such a phenomenon as a comic book story that we've also seen it creep into other media, with the stories for the MCU's Spider-Man No Way Home and Sony's animated action adventure Into the Spider-Verse taking inspiration from it. We'll also see the Spider-Verse continue to be explored in animated sequels across the Spider-Verse and beyond the Spider-Verse. In a perfect way, this makes a lot of sense, since it seems like inspiration for the comic book Spider-Verse likely came from the animated 90s series to begin with, so we've kind of come full circle at this point.